Hello friends. For today's video, I wanted to quickly chat through some things that have been going on with the Secret Projects by Brandon Sanderson, specifically the discussion around whether or not it is a spoiler to mention the titles of the Secret Projects. And I also wanted to add in some explanation for people who maybe have no idea what's going on with this. Sanderson has been known to do things that are sometimes pretty unprecedented, and a lot of times he does things that are good for the industry as a whole. For example, he is trying to look for ways to not always rely so much on Amazon and then through Amazon then Audible for audiobooks, because it can be very difficult for authors, and very specifically small authors and indie authors. Part of the reason that I wanted to discuss the situation is because it is so unprecedented, but not necessarily in a way that is going to be beneficial for other authors to try and follow within those footsteps. Jumping into it though, in case you are completely unaware of what the situation even is, quite a while ago, Sanderson announced that in 2020, because of the fact that he was no longer having to dedicate a lot of his work hours toward traveling, he was then taking those work hours and putting them toward writing other ideas that he had that weren't necessarily among the many other things that he already was working on. And in doing this, he completed multiple novels, and he decided that what he was going to do was take those novels and create some form of a book box, and he was going to do this through Kickstarter. You did not have to get the physical copies themselves. You could just back the Kickstarter by getting an ebook, an audiobook, a physical copy, or all of them combined. There were different tiers that you could buy into. In buying into these tiers, there were some sample covers, but they were not finalized. None of us knew what the titles were for the books, and none of us really knew what the books were about. We were definitely going in with very little information aside from the fact that Sanderson wrote a bunch of extra books, and we were all going to essentially partake in those together. And it was going to be the year of Sanderson. Every quarter, these books would be released, so you'd get one in January, you get one in April, and so on. And the idea was that it would be essentially very secretive. You would only know whatever information that they provided that you sought out, and one of those things was the title. However, things did shift slightly when it was announced that traditional publishers that Sanderson works with would also be publishing these books. It would just come after the Kickstarter. The idea is that when you back a Kickstarter, you pay a certain amount, and then you and only the other people that have backed that Kickstarter are going to get that product. But that would mean that anybody who couldn't afford the Kickstarter, anybody who didn't hear about it, anybody who didn't get the chance to back the Kickstarter or couldn't for various different reasons, it would seem as though those people weren't going to get access to those stories whatsoever. So it made sense that there would be a delayed release of the books through traditional publishers. And when those delayed releases would come out, the books would look different. It would still be the same story, but you would have the Kickstarter would come out first, and it would essentially be a special edition for those that got the physical copies. And then with the traditional published copies, those would be more like a regular edition of a book, and they would just be delayed. However, very shortly after the release of every single Kickstarter's ebook, there would be about a week and a half later that the traditional publisher would also be putting out the book, so that everyone around the same time could consume the story if they wanted. Backers do get the ebook and audiobook right at midnight at the first of the various different months within the quarter that those books are going to be released. And then, like I just said, it would be about a week and a half later that if you didn't back the Kickstarter, you could get the book through the traditional publisher. So there's just a little bit of a time difference, but ultimately, if you're a really big fan and if you're consuming the story, you're likely going to be consuming it roughly within the first week or two, or at least you'll get your copy within the first week or two of the book coming out. Now, tying this all back in to the idea of the title being a spoiler. The reason I said things shifted when the traditional publishers came into the picture is because their marketing campaigns and their posts are separate from Sanderson's team. Sanderson's team is referred to as Dragon Steel. It's essentially like his own publishing house, but it's really small because it's just his team. So when Tor is talking about the books, in their own marketing and their own posts, they might be using the actual titles of the books, whereas Sanderson's team was keeping that pretty secretive unless they had specific spoiler videos, meaning I'm going to talk about the synopsis, or I'm going to read an excerpt from the book, or I'm going to tell you the title of the book. So that's what I mean by spoilers. Just things that make it so it's not entirely a secret. Tor isn't necessarily doing that same thing, and there were actually some people that were pretty frustrated when Tor announced the release dates of the physical copies that they would be putting out, because when they did that, there were certain things about the books that got revealed, and people that had wanted it to be entirely a secret then were upset because that secret was no longer a secret for them. But there have been some people that have been kind of confused as to where things stand. How long do things remain a secret? Do they remain a secret if you now have access to the book on that midnight mark for Kickstarter backers? Do they remain a secret until people get their physical copies? Do they remain a secret until that week and a half date a little bit after midnight when Tor is releasing the ebook? So there's a lot of confusion. And way back months ago on Reddit, there was this R. Sanderson discussion. And it said an announcement regarding the Secret Project books. And this was back in 2022 before any of them were released. It talked about the books themselves and how the traditional publishers would be traditionally publishing hardbacks for the Secret Project Kickstarter books several months after the Kickstarter copies are sent out. The books are expected to be listed for pre-purchase starting tomorrow. Book titles will no longer be considered spoilers. The original pitch for the Secret Project Kickstarter was that people would go into the books completely blind without even advanced knowledge of the titles. However, the publishers would be sharing the titles and likely other information about the books in their own marketing and in the purchase listings. In the past, we, the mod team, have enforced a rule that the Secret Project book titles can't be mentioned in post titles or outside of specific Secret Project spoiler flares. We enforce that people refer to the books as Secret Project 1 through 4. There was excitement about the idea of a 100% blind read-through, and we wanted to accommodate that. However, in light of Brandon's announcement, we are concerned our existing spoiler policy will be confusing and unwelcoming to readers who find out about books through conventional marketing instead of through the Kickstarter, and won't understand why they can't mention a book title on the subreddit, or which titles they've heard about match up to which Secret Project book number, or which spoiler tags are safe for them to click. The last is of particular concern, as the subreddit relies on spoiler tags and flair to help readers navigate spoilers. With this in mind, and then in bold, we will no longer consider the titles of the Secret Project books to be spoilers. For now, we will be keeping the Secret Project spoiler flares as they are. However, we think it's likely that we will start to see people coming to the subreddit using the book titles and be confused by secret projects. If that happens, we will update the spoiler flares to indicate both the Secret Project number and the book title, so that hopefully it's clear to everyone what it refers to, no matter which source they heard about the book from. Any information about the contents of the books themselves will continue to be treated as a spoiler and will not be allowed outside of clearly indicated spoiler flare. So what has happened is that not everybody's on the same page. Not everybody is operating under the same idea of just how secretive all of this is. And so what happened when the first Secret Project came out is a lot of reviewers, they consumed the book really quickly because they were just so excited. They were so excited to talk about it, to discuss it. And so they ended up doing their reviews within a couple days of when the book came out. And a lot of us had the name of the book within the title of the video or in the thumbnail, things like that. Some of us had the cover in the thumbnail as well. And for the most part, I would say the majority of people thought nothing of it. But there were a few people that across the board, a lot of reviewers got comments saying, you have a spoiler in your title, you're spoiling this, you've ruined this for me, those sorts of comments. And a fair amount of us were pretty confused about, wait, what? And then there has been this kind of discussion of, is it a spoiler after the book is out to mention the title? And I did ask all of your thoughts over on my community tab and also my Instagram stories. And I originally was thinking there would be a little bit more variety in opinion, and there really isn't. It's kind of the majority of people saying, no, it's not a spoiler. And I was going to read off some of the opinions because I wanted to share people's different perspectives, but it would feel like it's just dogpiling on anybody who was wanting that originally promised experience of going in without knowing anything. And so I don't want to try and lump everybody who is in that camp as if they're all the same, because some people were really, really sweet and nice. And they were like, oh man, I didn't even think about the fact that 2 days after it would be released that all these reviewers would be talking about it, and in my notifications I'd be seeing the title over and over again. I didn't even think about that. So next time I'll have to make sure I turn off my notifications for YouTube. That way I don't have it spoiled for me and I can remain unaware until my physical copy is shipped, because that's usually the case. It's not usually people who are getting digital copies, because those people are primarily just going to also open the file immediately. Or so we thought, until Sanderson recently sent out an email, and it's about the links themselves that get sent out at midnight. And it says, we are less than 2 weeks away from the release of Secret Project 2. We are excited for all backers to receive their ebook files on April 1st, 2023 at midnight MDT. And we have heard your request. The digital download file names will not spoil the book title for Secret Project 2. All digital downloads will be zipped, and only the file names within the zip will contain the book title. And then they go on to say, we will also delay the use of the title or put it behind a spoiler warning in campaign updates until after the physical books have all been shipped. However, beginning on April 11th, when the ebook and audiobook become available to the general public, Brandon and the Dragonsteel publicity team will use the title freely in all posts related to the book. So there's a few things about this that are kind of interesting. At this point, what's happening is, okay, so this particular thing is for people who have access to it at midnight, but just aren't wanting to open the file, I suppose, until maybe they have a lot of free time, maybe until their days off from work or something, when they can finally open the file and read it all at once, and they don't want to open it until that moment. And I suppose for that reason, it makes sense that you would want to allow them that opportunity for, if they so choose for themselves, that they can do that. I don't really have an issue with that, but I am a little confused about some of the specifics here, because if somebody gets mad because reviewers are starting to talk about the book and they're using the title within the title of their video, you did have access to it. This would make more sense to me if people who had to wait until April 11th were frustrated. So the file not having the title isn't going to apply to them because they're not through the Kickstarter anyway. They're going to be buying it from a traditional publisher and probably through a different retailer. And so they're going to maybe get the title on April 11th, and people are going to absolutely be putting their reviews up before the 11th, I'm sure. So I could see those individuals being frustrated. And I don't say this sarcastically. I'm not trying to be condescending. But what I was saying earlier about some people kind of deciding for themselves, I'll make sure I turn off notifications for YouTube. I don't think that it can be expected of every reviewer and every individual online to not have the title until April 11th. But I don't really see those people being the ones that are likely going to be upset anyway, because they didn't back the Kickstarter. That's the whole reason they're getting the book on April 11th, is that they didn't feel the need to have this experience of, I'm going to go in completely unaware and I'm going to back this project knowing nothing. That's not that group of people. This is a group of people that came to it later and decided that they're going to pick the books up when they can, and it's available to them by April 11th. There might be a small amount of people that wanted that experience, and again, for whatever reason, couldn't back the Kickstarter, and therefore had to wait. So if you're that person and you really want that experience, then again, I would recommend turning off notifications. That way you don't have to worry about it. Maybe avoid YouTube for about a week and a half. What I do find interesting about this post, though, is that it says that they will not use the title, or they'll put it behind a spoiler warning until, it says in campaign updates, until after the physical books have all been shipped. So there is another group of people that I can see being frustrated, and that would be a group of people who have backed the Kickstarter. They want this experience. They want to know nothing until the book arrives on their doorstep and they can open it up and see the title, see what it looks like, flip through it, read it. And it's not going to matter really if it's shipped by a certain date. What would matter for those people is when the books arrive, because there's plenty of people that aren't going to get their books until after April 11th. And so then is the idea that we all don't say the title until every single person who's ordered the book has gotten their copy delivered. That's a very US-centered mindset anyway, because international backers aren't going to get their books, probably some of them, for over a month. I think there's even some people in the US that still haven't gotten the first Secret Project, and that's where Sanderson's team is based in. So it doesn't really matter if it's shipped by a certain date, and if his team is going to start using it, I think it would make sense that reviewers can then start using the title. The last thing I'll mention, the reason I was talking about how this is unprecedented but not something that other authors can do, is titles and cover reveals are such an enormous part of marketing for other authors that this is not something other people can follow through with. This isn't something that we can completely change the way the majority of books are brought to us, because that's part of the excitement, that's part of the buildup. And as much as we have heard the phrase over and over again growing up that don't judge a book by its cover, cover artists work really hard, and cover designers and everybody involved with making a cover, they often work really hard to make sure that that cover is going to grab the attention of the people that will likely have enjoyment from that book. It's to serve both the author and the consumer. Obviously, they're a business, so it's for them to try to make money too. We're not going to pretend that doesn't exist, but there are plenty of times that I'll see an amazing cover and be like, what is that? It's true of the book, The Art of Prophecy. I saw that cover and it wasn't a hyped book, but as soon as I saw that cover, I was really excited and I wanted to know more. And then that led me to look into the book, and I thought it sounded cool. And then I picked up the book and I thought it was cool. And that's part of how you get books out to people, and the titles are a part of that too. There's a ton of things that if you are pretty active online in book communities, a lot of times authors will even have fun little games where people have to guess the titles of their books. And if you do have a guess entry, then your entry is then submitted into some kind of a giveaway, and sometimes people can get arcs and things like that, where it's just a fun way to kind of build up the hype around a book. And so this is not something that others can do. This is truly just an experience that is probably set for this Kickstarter Secret Project campaign. And I can see why for some people it's a once-in-a-lifetime thing, and that's why they wanted it to remain as secretive as possible. But I just think with shipping delays, with people getting the books at different times, with Tor not being on the same page necessarily as Dragonsteel as to when they're going to put stuff out, when Reddit threads, people have different ideas of what they're going to do where, I think the best we can do is just communicate individually, if we're reviewers, what we're going to do. And for me, I'm going to use the title of the book in the title of the video. I will likely also have the cover art in the thumbnails as well, and I will do that as soon as I'm able to. Sometimes I might get to the book as soon as it comes out. I might stay up and read it and then get a review out a day later or something, and other times it might not be for a week or two. I just wanted to give that heads up so that if you are someone who wants to do what you can to keep everything secretive until the book arrives on your doorstep or until you get your digital file through the traditional publisher, if that's you, I wanted to give you that heads up that I am going to be using the title so that you can either turn notifications off for my channel, or even if you need to, unsubscribe for a little bit. Whatever you need to do to keep that experience the way that you want it for yourself, go for it. Do that. And then if you don't care, then the title will be here whenever reviews go up. That's it though. Please feel free to let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.